So, Professor, you recently did make headlines for condemning what's happening in Turkey with the repression of the Kurds there. The president of Turkey actually responded to what you said. He invited you there, which you declined. I was just wondering if you could briefly speak to what happened, why you were condemning what's happening with the Kurds, what is going on there, and why you refused the invitation to go to Turkey.
I responded by saying that if I go to Turkey, I would not go on the invitation of the government, just as I don't go anywhere else on the invitation of governments. I would go on the invitation of the people who I respect and collaborate with, Turkish dissidents, Turkish protesters, the 1,000 or so academics who were both initiated and signed the petition that I made, Kurdish activists and others. I've been there quite a number of times, and I would go again under those circumstances. There is, first of all, a pretty awful record of repression of the Kurds in Turkey. It was worse than the 1990s. Then it was really horrendous. It was tens of thousands of people killed, maybe 3,500 or so towns and villages destroyed, hundreds of thousands of Kurdish refugees fleeing elsewhere, every imaginable form of torture you can think of. And it was all, it was mostly, it was funded by the United States. The U.S. provided about 80% of the arms. As the atrocities increased, U.S. aid increased. In 1 year, 1997, Clinton sent more military aid to Turkey than in the entire Cold War period combined up until the onset of the counterinsurgency. It was a pretty brutal affair. And by the early years of this century, it was beginning to settle a little bit. It declined. And there were improvements. There were steps towards a more open, free society in general. There was the beginning of the recognition of the atrocities against the Armenians, the horrible atrocities a century ago, which you couldn't talk about before, but public opinion was changing. The whole situation was improving under Erdogan, in fact, current president, and then it reversed. A few years ago, it started going back in the other direction. In the last several months, there was a ceasefire with the Kurdish guerrilla movement, the PKK, which is actually based in the Kurdish areas of Iraq. But that's broken down. We could talk about the details, but it broke down. And one consequence is that the Turkish government, the Erdogan government, has begun to carry out pretty severe repression in the Kurdish areas, southeastern Turkey. You can read, for example, Amnesty International reports and other reports that give the details, but a couple 100,000 of people are essentially under curfew. Some literally can't leave their homes for a month even to get food because of the fear of snipers, heavy armor in the streets and so on. And plenty of people have been killed, and it's pretty harsh repression. Well, in protest against this, Turkish academics, I think it was about 1,000, initiated and signed a petition protesting the increased repression against the Kurds. They asked a few, for some international signers, I was one of the signers, then came the comments by the president that you referred to. There was a terrible bombing in Ankara, a terrorist bombing, and he made an angry speech about how people who signed the petition, singling me out personally, were supporting the terrorists. And he kind of paraphrased George Bush: "You're either with us or with the terrorists."
Well,
no, but there's a little more to say about that. That bombing was carried out by ISIS, not by the Kurdish guerrillas.
Right.
And Erdogan has been supporting ISIS. In fact, Turkey has kept its borders pretty open so that foreign jihadis can flow into the ISIS territories and oil up until about a year ago, ISIS oil was openly going into Turkey. Now it still is indirectly, and the ground forces in Syria who are fighting ISIS are the Kurds, who Turkey is attacking. In fact, right now, there's supposed to be discussions in Syria about, they're starting, in fact, a couple of days. It's supposed to be negotiations about moving towards some kind of political settlement. Turkey is insisting that the Kurds, Syrian Kurds, not be represented. They're the most important force struggling against ISIS, and have also carved out a relatively autonomous area with quite interesting and important internal developments. But here's Erdogan, and in response, I was asked to comment on his remarks by Turkish media, and I said something very simple. I said, yes, there's an ISIS terrorist attack. Erdogan is effectively supporting ISIS. He's now claiming that if you're either with us or with the terrorists, I just said no further comment is necessary.